Why had he been sitting there for 2 hours? And why did his eyes feel like they were looking straight through her? Sarah Nightingale Cross had perfected the art of disappearing. 3 years had passed since she walked away from Delta Force Intelligence. And now she hid in plain sight behind the counter of Murphy's Bar and Grill in San Diego. Her hands no longer knew the weight of an M4 or the chill of a suppressed barrel after a midnight mission. They carried plates, poured beer, and smelled of fryer grease instead of gun oil. The change was deliberate. Her auburn hair was tied in a casual ponytail, not the tactical bun she'd worn like armor. 15 pounds of civilian softness blurred the edges of a once lean, ghost-like frame. Even her voice had shifted, a borrowed southern accent from a long-retired alias in Alabama, in Murphy's. She was just Sarah the waitress, a woman, paying her way through community college with vague dreams of opening her own restaurant. It was Friday night, peak chaos. Murphy sat only 3 blocks from Naval Base San Diego, which meant uniforms and crew cuts were as common here as neon beer signs. The air was thick with fried food, spilled drinks, and stories of deployment. Sarah worked the room on instinct. Not just waitress instinct, the other kind. The kind you never lose. She knew who was on their first date at table 2, who was celebrating a promotion at table 4, and who would leave alone and drunk at table 8. She also knew who didn't belong. Table 6, one man. Civilian clothes, dark jeans, a plain gray hoodie, Padres cap pulled low. But his posture was wrong. Too straight, too still, his back to the wall, eyes mapping exits, hands resting just so. She knew that look. Not casual awareness hunting. She saw it in the way his gaze lingered on her during her first pass. Not like a man noticing a woman, like a man confirming an identification. Sarah's instincts whispered the things she didn't want to hear. Shoulder holster under the left arm, tactical boots, a desert tan that didn't come from California. Sun, and the scar, a pale slash at his temple, the kind you got from shrapnel. Not bar fights. By the time closing came and the crowd thinned, the tension between them had coiled tight. When she passed him with a fresh beer, just close enough to read the truth in his eyes, his hand shot out, wrapping her wrist, not hurting, but controlling. His thumb pressed her pulse point, measuring. Then, in a voice too low for anyone else to hear, he said 3 words. Mockingbird needs her cage. Her blood turned to ice. Only 3 people alive knew that phrase. 2 were supposed to be dead. Her face didn't change, not even a flicker. Just the bland mask of a waitress dealing with a drunk. But her mind spun through threat assessments and escape routes. That phrase was no small talk. It was a Delta Force activation code, a sleeper protocol for emergencies, one that hadn't been used since Operation Blackbird. A mission sealed so deep it didn't officially exist. I think you've had enough to drink, sir, she said clearly, letting the nearby customers hear the role she was playing. His grip loosened, his eyes didn't. Jake Sullivan, he said, softly. Reaper 6, Aleppo extraction. You pulled me out of a kill zone. The memory hit her like a hammer, Syria. 18 months ago, the last stop before she walked away. They'd traded lives for each other that night, and never spoken again now. He was here, looking like hell, and he had just brought her old life crashing back. I'll wait in the parking lot, Jake said. Blue Silverado. License plate starts with 7G. Come alone. Watch for surveillance. They've been tracking me for 3 days. Sarah nodded like she hadn't just felt her entire world tilt on its axis, turned, and walked away to finish her closing routine. She didn't look back, but she already knew. The life she buried was digging its way out of the ground. The back door to Murphy's closed behind her with a muted thud. The alley was dim. 2 streetlights fighting to push back the dark. Their weak cones of yellow barely touched the cracked asphalt. Somewhere beyond the dumpsters, a rat scurried through a pile of cardboard, its claws making small, dry sounds. Sarah's sneakers whispered against the ground as she moved in the shadows, instinctively placing each step where it wouldn't echo. Civilian clothes, but muscle memory was still military. The Silverado waited near the far end, backed in for a quick exit. Paint glistening faintly in the light, Jake leaned against the driver's door, posture casual in a way that was anything but. "You look different," he said as she approached. It didn't feel that way. Until 5 minutes ago, her voice was low, clipped, close enough to speak quietly, far enough to react if things went bad. "What's the situation, Reaper?" Jake's eyes, bloodshot, ringed with exhaustion, held hers for a moment too. Long. There it was again. That heaviness. The look of a man about to tell you something you don't want to hear. "Our entire unit's gone, Nightingale. Every last operator from Blackbird. Dead." The words seemed to scrape through the air. He listed them one by one. Accidents, overdoses, suicides, all perfectly explainable to someone who didn't know the pattern. She did. Her stomach turned cold. "How? Many?" she asked. "Confirmed?" "Everyone but us." He handed her a burner phone. On its screen, news articles, obituaries, the faces of people she'd trusted with her life. Each death plausible in isolation. Together, a kill list. "What? About Hayes?" she asked. Jake's jaw tightened. 4 days ago. Pentagon office, single gunshot. Suicide note claiming she sold classified intel. But before they got her, she sent me a message, coded coordinates. She hid evidence, proof of what really happened on our missions. He leaned closer, voice dropping lower. "Nightingale, we weren't hunting terrorists. We were eliminating witnesses." The words landed heavy, like a round hitting armor you weren't sure would hold. Sarah's breath stilled. The cold that spread through her wasn't fear. It was recognition. "Who's hunting us?" Jake's gaze flicked to the rooftops, scanning. "Contractors, high-end, with access to our files. They know how we think. And how we die." Something in his tone told her this wasn't paranoia. He'd been running, sleeping rough, not trusting anyone. And still, they'd found him. The glint came first. A tiny flash above the street, like a piece of glass catching stray light. She didn't think. She moved. Her shoulder hit him hard, driving them both behind the Silverado just as the first shot cracked. The windshield exploded where his head had been. Contact. Jake was already moving. Glock 19 clearing leather. Sniper. 11 o'clock high. Sarah slid to the truck's engine block, the heaviest cover in sight. 200 meters. Rooftop. 4-story building, perfect field of fire. How did they? Same way they found the others. He cut in, reloading. They know everyone we'd run to. A second round punched through the rear glass, showering them with glittering shards. She could hear his breathing, controlled, trained, and it pulled something old and sharp out of her own chest. The shift was instant. The 3 years she'd spent living like a civilian dissolved, replaced by cold, surgical calculation. "We can't stay here," she whispered. "They'll flank us." Jake nodded. "Hayes Cache is 2 miles, old. Metro Tunnel, Section 7. She had it in her head already. Blueprints from her first months in San Diego, studied for reasons she'd never been able to explain to herself. An abandoned transit project, forgotten, except by people who needed escape routes. "We'll never make it in the truck," she said. "Storm drain, 50 meters north. On your count." She pulled the SIG P365 from under her shirt. Small, light, 10 rounds. Jake's eyebrows lifted just slightly. Old habits. She muttered. The third shot whined past her ear. The sniper was walking his aim in, finding their line. 3, 2, 1. They moved low and fast, sprint, drop, cover, sprint again. Muscle memory choreographed in another lifetime. A round sparked off the asphalt. Another hit metal. Then they were in the drain. Darkness swallowing them. The sounds. of the street replaced by the trickle of foul water and the echo of boots. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them into a crouch. The air was thick with the stench of runoff and old concrete. Our flashlight stayed dark. Light was a beacon. After 20 minutes, they reached a larger chamber. Rusted equipment, graffiti tags. Sarah kept her voice low. Section 7's through there. They found the panel exactly where Jake said. Behind it, a waterproof case, heavy with something more dangerous than explosives. The contents made her skin crawl. Classified mission files, photos, bank transfers. Hayes had traced serial numbers from sites they'd hit. Weapons they thought they'd destroyed, recovered and resold instead. Targets they'd neutralized who weren't terrorists at all, but journalists, investigators, even foreign officials trying to track missing American weapons. General Patricia Morrison's name appeared too many times. Shell companies, offshore accounts, payoffs. She's running it, Sarah said quietly. The whole thing. Morrison. The legend. The decorated Joint Chiefs General who'd pinned a medal on Sarah's chest. The betrayal burned hotter than the rage. Jake was flipping through another folder, his face tightening with every page. It's not just cover-ups. They've been killing competition, Somalia, Yemen. Those weren't mission threats. They were in the way of the business. The sound reached them then, faint, deliberate. Splashes through water, boots, a team moving slow and careful. Sarah's head came up. They found the drain. Motion sensors, Jake murmured, pointing to small devices stuck to the walls. We've been tagged since entry. The water rippled again, closer now. Sarah stuffed the most critical evidence into a waterproof bag, fingers quick and sure. There's an emergency exit 200 meters north. Balboa Park, we move. The first shot cracked in the tunnel. Its muzzle flashed a strobe in the black. They ran. The gunfire was deafening in the confined space, each shot ricocheting between concrete walls until it felt like the air itself was breaking. They're using the acoustics, Jake said, ducking past a rusted pipe as rounds sparked off metal. Hard to track positions. Sarah's P365 felt small in her hands. 10 rounds, 2 mags. Jake's Glock wasn't much better. Against a kill team with full kits and endless ammo, they were outmatched. We need to even the odds, she said. Electrical junction. 50 meters ahead. I can cut the lights. The world narrowed to sound and shadow. They moved with the kind of discipline you can't fake. Every step placed with care. Every breath measured. The junction box was where she remembered it. 30 seconds, she whispered, prying it open. Jake's warning came with the first burst. Contact front. He fired 3 times. 2 bodies dropped hard. The others kept coming. The breaker snapped down, and the tunnel went black. Silence swallowed them, broken only by the soft slap of water and the smell of ozone. They've got NV, Jake said. Sarah was already moving to the cache she'd marked years ago. Her hands closed around industrial flares. She lit one, a violent, searing red, and tossed it down the main passage. The sudden blaze washed the tunnel in hellish light, frying the night vision of anyone looking. Shadows jumped, warped, distorted. This way, she said, ducking into a side shaft barely wide enough to crawl. The shaft spat them into the old subway platform, a cavern of concrete and steel, half-built and abandoned. The emergency exit ladder waited across open ground. Jake's eyes scanned it once. They'll have it covered. Repelling gear clinked from above. The enemy was already at the hatch. There's another way, Sarah said. Already moving. Sewer link, not on any map. Behind a false wall, the hidden passage yawned. Narrow, rank, but unguarded. Ladies first, Jake said, grim humor in his voice. The sewer tunnel was larger, the water deeper, moving with a sluggish current. Sarah's mind traced the map. Under downtown, if we follow east, we'll come up near the Federal Building. Jake almost smiled. I've got a contact there. Someone clean. The explosion hit before he finished the sentence. The pressure wave slammed into them, the air itself seeming to punch through their chests. "They're sealing the tunnels," Sarah said. "Already." Moving faster, wiping the scene clean, they pressed on. The maintenance hatch at the federal building was exactly where she remembered. They emerged into the mechanical room, dripping, reeking, alive. Jake keyed his secure comms, speaking. "Fast. Martinez, it's Reaper. I've got Nightingale. And we've got the package." Sarah laid out the evidence on a workbench, organizing as Jake relayed their location. Minutes later, a woman in plain clothes and sharp eyes stepped into the room. She didn't waste time on introductions. Her gaze went to the files, her expression tightening. "This is enough to burn Morrison down," Agent Martinez said. "But if the coup's real, we've got less than a day to move." Sarah's hand froze halfway through stacking documents. "What? Coup?" Jake's voice was low. "Hayes' last notes. Morrison's been placing her people at bases across the country, contractors waiting for a signal tomorrow night. She takes out the other Joint Chiefs during a Pentagon meeting, declares a national emergency." Sarah felt the familiar steel slot into place inside her chest. The mission had just changed, and there would be no walking away this time. The mechanical room smelled faintly of oil and old copper. Sarah stood over the workbench, her palms pressed flat against the cold metal surface. Her eyes traced the files again, the names and dates, the blurred surveillance shots, all pieces of a puzzle that, if put together, could shatter careers and topple one of the most decorated generals in the country. Jake was pacing, his boots making dull thuds against the concrete floor. His shirt was still damp from the sewer. His hair matted, but his mind was already running. Full tilt, calculating time, distance, risk. Martinez leaned against a steel support beam, arms crossed, her gaze moving between them and the evidence. "We don't have a day," she said. "We barely have hours. If Morrison is planning to strike at tomorrow night's meeting, we can't wait for a clean investigation. We'll lose." Sarah looked up slowly. "Then we don't investigate. We act." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly does that mean?" Jake stopped pacing. "It means we get ahead of her. We make it impossible for her to move without exposing herself." Martinez shook her head. "You don't understand. Morrison controls pieces of the intelligence community. She's got people in key positions across the military and civilian sectors. If we move too openly, they'll know, and they'll shut us down, or worse." Sarah's voice was calm, but each word was laced with something cold and unshakable. "Then we don't move openly. We use what's left of the playbook they trained us on, the one for operations that don't officially exist." Jake glanced at her. He understood exactly what she meant. Martinez's eyes narrowed. "You're talking about going dark." "Completely," Sarah said. "No comms they can track, no paper trail, no friendly assets unless they're face-to-face and we can read their eyes. We hit 3 objectives in parallel: lock down the evidence, identify Morrison's inner circle, and plant enough doubt in her own ranks that she can't risk the coup." Martinez didn't answer right away. She was calculating, weighing the risks, knowing the line between brave and reckless was paper thin. "And if you fail?" "Then she wins," Jake said flatly. "And a lot more than the 2 of us end up dead." The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Martinez exhaled. "All right, but you'll need support." Discreet, deniable. She pulled a phone from her pocket, a battered, off-brand model. "I can get you a safe location to work from and maybe 2 or 3 field agents who aren't in Morrison's pocket. After that, you're on your own." Sarah reached for the evidence. "Where's the safe location?" "Downtown, old post office building. Basement was converted into a federal storage site decades ago. No digital footprint. It's where we keep things too sensitive for network storage." Jake almost smiled. Perfect. They left through a freight elevator that hadn't been in regular use since the late 80s. The streets outside were washed in sodium light. quiet except for the hum of transformers and the distant wail of a siren somewhere toward the bay. Sarah kept her hood up, scanning reflections in shop windows, the movement of shadows at intersections. Even walking felt wrong. Too exposed. Every second, she expected the sharp crack of a rifle or the low roar of an approaching vehicle. Jake drove. Martinez sat in the back, one hand inside her coat, her eyes constantly shifting between the sidewalk and the mirrors. Halfway to the post office, Sarah's instinct screamed. Jake. He saw it. 2. The sedan that had been 3 cars back suddenly changing lanes, closing distance. Martinez, Jake said, voice tight. I see it. She pulled a compact SMG from beneath her coat, the kind of weapon you didn't carry unless you expected trouble. The sedan accelerated. Headlights flared in the rearview mirror. Sarah's hand closed around the SIG. They're not waiting till tomorrow. Jake floored it. The chase tore through downtown streets, tires squealing on rain-slick asphalt. Jake cut hard through an intersection just as the light turned red, the sedan following without hesitation. They're not worried about police, Martinez said. Why would they be? Jake shot back. They probably own the dispatcher. Sarah leaned out her window, bracing against the doorframe. Her first shot shattered the sedan's passenger headlight. The second went wide. Too much distance. Too much movement. The sedan swerved, trying to cut them off. Left. Sarah shouted. Jake swung the wheel, the Silverado's tires catching and releasing with a violent squeal. The sedan clipped a mailbox, metal screeching as it crumpled against the bumper. But it kept coming. Martinez's SMG barked twice. The sedan's windshield spiderwebbed, but still it didn't back off. Persistent, Jake muttered. Sarah saw it then. The faint gleam of something on the sedan's roof, not a light bar. A mount, roof gun. She yelled, Jake. The burst came fast, heavy caliber, chewing through the tailgate. Sparks flew as rounds punched through the metal and ricocheted off the street. Hang on. Jake swerved again, clipping the corner of a parked delivery truck. The impact spun the Silverado half a turn, but it put the truck's bulk between them and the gunfire for a precious second. Martinez leaned out, firing short, controlled bursts. One round caught the sedan's front tire. The car fishtailed hard, clipped a lamppost, and stopped dead. Not clean, Jake said, watching the driver's door open. Then we go, Sarah replied. They didn't wait to see if the men got up. Jake gunned it, heading for the post office. The old building stood dark against the skyline, its stone facade stained by decades of rain and exhaust. Inside, the basement smelled of dust and paper. Rows of locked cabinets stood like silent sentries. This place is off-grid? Sarah asked. Martinez nodded. No cameras, no network. If it's in here, it doesn't exist to anyone but the person holding the key. She handed Sarah a small brass key with a single scratch down its spine. Locker 47. It's yours until this is over. They worked quickly, spreading files across a cleared table. Morrison's network was big, too big for a clean takedown in less than a day. We can't dismantle her in time, Jake said, but we can force her to abort. Sarah traced a finger across a map of the Pentagon. She's counting on surprise. If even a fraction of her people think the op's compromised, she won't risk it. The only way to make that happen is to put something in front of them they can't ignore. Martinez frowned. Like what? Sarah's eyes met Jake's. Like us. You want to bait her? Martinez said. No, Sarah said. I want to make her think she's already lost control. We leak just enough of Hayes' evidence to people she trusts, anonymously. Make her question her inner circle. Make her burn her own time hunting ghosts while we move. Martinez hesitated. That's risky. If she figures out the source, she will. Jake interrupted. And she'll come for us, which is exactly what we want. Because if she's chasing us, she's not pulling a coup. The room went quiet. Martinez finally said, if you're going to do this, you'll need cover identities, burner coms, transport. I can get you some of it. The rest, you'll have to lift yourselves." Jake smiled faintly. Just like old times. They left the post office at 2:13, splitting into two vehicles, Martinez in one, Sarah and Jake in another. The city felt different now. Every intersection a choke point, every rooftop a potential sniper's nest. The glow of street lamps felt more like spotlights than safety. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, eyes scanning, ears tuned to the engine's hum. "You ever think," Jake said after a long silence, "that maybe walking away was the smartest thing you ever did?" She almost laughed. "Right now, I'm thinking I should have walked farther." But they both knew the truth. Neither of them had it in them to walk forever. Some things had to be faced. Her phone buzzed once. A single unlisted number. She opened it, read the message, and felt the hair on her arms lift. 2 words, "We see you." She turned the phone so Jake could see. He didn't say anything, just pressed harder on the gas. The message glowed on Sarah's phone like a lit fuse. "We see you." 2 words. No number, no trace. Jake kept his eyes on the road, his grip tightening around the wheel. "They're inside our perimeter." Sarah powered the phone off and slid it into the glove compartment. Then we pushed back. She'd seen enough high-value targets in her life to know one thing. They all had a breaking point. Sometimes it was fear of losing control. Sometimes it was paranoia about betrayal. With Morrison, it would be both. The plan they'd sketched at the post office was dangerous. Leak pieces of Hayes' evidence into Morrison's own network. But the trick wasn't just getting the information out. It was how they got it out. Jake put it plainly. She has to think the leak came from her people, not us. They parked 3 blocks from a 24-hour print shop that Sarah remembered from her early days in San Diego. Not a chain, no cameras. Owner didn't care what you printed as long as you paid cash. They worked fast, copying select pieces of evidence. Mission reports, intercepted comms, photographs, but nothing that revealed the full picture. "We give them fragments," Sarah said, sliding a page into the copier. Just enough to look real, enough to make her start checking her own ranks. Jake loaded the next document, and while she's doing that, she's burning time and trust. Within an hour, they had a manila envelope thick enough to feel important, thin enough to look stolen. The first drop was at a hotel bar downtown, the kind of place where contractors passed through between jobs, swapping cash and information in plain sight. Sarah spotted the target instantly. Mid-40s, civilian clothes, military posture. A burner phone on the table beside his drink. "Name's Callahan," Martinez had said earlier. Used to run security for Morrison's personal transport. Still on her payroll, unofficially. Jake slid onto a bar stool 2 seats away, ordered a beer. Sarah took a seat on the other side of Callahan, close enough for the envelope to accidentally slip from her bag onto the floor by his foot. She didn't look at him when she got up and walked out. Jake followed a minute later from the sidewalk. They watched through the bar's wide window. As Callahan bent down, picked up the envelope, and started flipping through the contents, his posture changed, shoulders stiffened, eyes narrowed. "You think he buys it?" Jake asked. Sarah didn't take her eyes off the man. "He doesn't have to buy it. He just has to panic." The second drop was riskier. A parking garage in Little Italy, dim lighting, concrete pillars casting deep shadows. The target this time, a logistics officer tied to Morrison's supply chain. Younger, lean, the kind who'd climb over anyone to move up. Sarah left the envelope on the hood of his car, tucked just under the wiper blade. From the rooftop across the street, she and Jake watched as he approached, saw it, and looked around with quick, jerky movements. Jake muttered, "He'll call her within the hour." That's the idea. By the time they made the third drop, to a courier known for shuttling sealed packages between Morrison's offices and her forward operating contacts, Sarah could feel the pressure building. They were threading a needle here. Leak too little. Morrison might not bite. leaked too much, and she'd know the information came from outside her circle. Jake leaned against the hood of the Silverado, watching the city breathe in the early hours before dawn. When she figures out it's us. Sarah met his gaze. She'd come hard. He almost smiled. Good. Then we'll know where she is. It didn't take long. Martinez called at 5:27. You've got movement? 3 of Morrison's senior aides have gone dark. One of her contractors is asking questions about an internal breach, and Martinez hesitated. We picked up chatter about a kill team mobilizing in San Diego. Jake exhaled slowly. That's our confirmation. Sarah asked the question anyway. How big? 6 to 8 operators, full kit. They're not coming to scare you. They're coming to erase you. Jake straightened from the truck. Where? Unknown. But if I were them, I'd hit you somewhere you can't control the perimeter. Sarah's eyes narrowed, which means we picked the ground first. They didn't head for cover. They headed for a place Sarah had kept in her back pocket since the day she left Delta, a warehouse near the waterfront. Condemned on paper, but still structurally sound. She'd used it once, years ago, as a dead drop site inside. The air smelled faintly of salt and machine oil. Steel beams loomed overhead. A few dusty crates were stacked near the walls. Plenty of space, plenty of angles. Jake looked around. Good sight lines, no civilians. We can work with this. Sarah unzipped the duffel bag Martinez had quietly supplied. Suppressed carbines, extra mags, 2 sets of NV goggles. Gear up, she said. They weren't going to run this time. The kill team came at 7:42. 2 black SUVs rolled to a stop outside the warehouse. Doors opened in unison. Boots hit asphalt. Sarah watched from the second-floor catwalk, eyes behind her scope. Jake was below, hidden behind a stack of crates, covering the main entrance. The first man through the door moved like he'd done this 100 times. Muzzle up, sweeping. Corners. 2 more followed. Sarah waited until they cleared the entryway before firing. 1 round, clean to the shoulder of the rear man. He dropped with a shout, weapon clattering. The others reacted instantly, diving for cover, returning fire. Toward her position, bullets chewed into the steel railing beside her, sparks showering into the darkness. Jake's voice came in over the earpiece. 3 more coming in from the south wall. Copy, she said, shifting position. The firefight was short, brutal, and loud. Suppressors cut the sharp crack of gunfire, but not the thud of rounds finding targets or the metallic clang of ricochets. When it was over, 4 of the kill team were down. The other 2 had vanished into the maze of crates and shadows. Sarah's pulse was steady, her breathing even. The civilian shell she'd built over the last 3 years was gone. The operator was back. Jake moved from cover, weapons still raised. They'll pull back. Report in. Then Morrison will know we're not running anymore. Sarah glanced at the bodies. Good. Let her know. By the time the sun broke fully over the bay, they were gone from the warehouse, evidence secured, weapons wiped. The SUVs had been stripped of anything useful before they disappeared into the city. Martinez's voice over the phone was low but urgent. Whatever you did, it's working. Morrison just delayed her departure for D.C. She's circling the wagons, probably trying to figure out who she can still trust. Sarah felt the shift in her bones. The balance was tilting. Jake leaned back in the driver's seat. Now we keep squeezing until something breaks. Sarah looked out the window, the morning light catching on the edge of her profile. No, she said quietly. We don't wait for something to break. We make it break. The decision to leave San Diego came before sunrise. Martinez laid it out on the map spread across the post office basement table. We've got less than 12 hours before the Pentagon meeting. Morrison's already stalling, but that won't last. If she gets her coup team in place before we can force her hand, she'll move anyway. Jake traced a finger along the route east. You want us to take this fight into her backyard? Martinez nodded. D.C. isn't just where she's going to act. It's where she's weakest. Too many eyes, too much press. If we can leak enough proof there before she locks down the city, she'd never risk making her move. Sarah studied the route. She'd made cross-country runs before, but never with a clock this tight and a target this big. Flying's out, she said. Every commercial manifest will be flagged. And I don't want to be trapped in a tin can at 30,000 feet when she realizes where we're going. Then we drive, Jake said. Martinez slid a key across the table. Unregistered SUV, full tank, no GPS. But once you're on the road, you're on your own. I can't give you backup without tipping our people. Sarah pocketed the key. We don't need backup. Jake looked at her. A ghost of a grin on his face. Feels almost nostalgic. The SUV was a nondescript gray, the kind of vehicle that could blend into traffic anywhere from California to Virginia. They loaded the evidence, weapons, and enough food and water to get them through without stopping more than necessary. By 8:10, they were on Interstate 8, heading east toward the desert. The first hours passed in silence, the kind of silence between operators who knew that talk was wasted energy. Sarah kept her eyes on the mirrors, tracking the flow of traffic, watching for tails. Every so often, Jake's gaze would flick to the side window, scanning the horizon. It wasn't until they crossed into Arizona that he spoke. You ever think about what you'll do after this? Sarah almost laughed. After? I haven't thought past the next mile marker. I mean, if we win, if we actually put Morrison down. She kept her eyes on the road. Then maybe I'll finally open that restaurant, and maybe this time I won't keep a rifle under the counter. They switched drivers outside Tucson, refueled at a cash-only station where the attendant didn't look up from his crossword puzzle. The desert heat shimmered off the asphalt, blurring the line between earth and sky. Jake took the wheel while Sarah tried to rest, but her mind kept replaying the files, the faces of the people they'd lost, the missions twisted into something dirty. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Morrison's expression from the last time they'd met. The smile of someone who knew exactly how much power she held. Somewhere near the New Mexico line, Jake broke the silence again. We're being followed. Sarah was instantly. A Waco? Vehicle? Black pickup, 2 cars back. Picked this up about 20 miles ago. Keeps pace. Never passes. Sarah glanced in the side mirror. The truck was there. Dusty. Mid-2000s model. 2 men in the cab. How do you want to play it? Jake asked. We don't want to lead them to the evidence, Sarah said. So we cut them loose before we crossed the state line. They exited onto a service road that paralleled the interstate. Low scrub and rusted fence lines stretching to Boise. The horizon, the pickup followed. Jake took a left down a dirt track. Dust rose behind them, and the truck matched their turn. Sarah unzipped the duffel at her feet. We give them one chance to back off. Jake slowed, letting the pickup close the distance. At 50 yards, Sarah leaned out her window, cig in hand. She fired 2 warning shots into the dirt just ahead of their front bumper. The pickup slowed but didn't stop. Not contractors, Jake said. Reading their movements, too sloppy, could be hired locals. Paid eyes, Sarah agreed. Means Morrison's casting a wider net. They didn't wait for another pass. Jake floored it. The SUV's tires biting into the dirt. The pickup tried to keep up, but on the uneven track, their suspension couldn't handle the speed. Within minutes, the dust cloud behind them faded into nothing. They crossed into Texas by late afternoon. The flat land and endless sky made it harder to spot threats. Everything looked like a potential ambush. They stopped in a small town where the tallest building was the grain elevator. Sarah went inside a diner for coffee while Jake refueled. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with a sharp eye, slid 2 mugs across the counter. You two. From out of town? Sarah smiled politely. Just passing through. The woman leaned in a little. Well, you might want to keep passing. Sheriff's been asking about strangers today. Real interested in anyone driving east. Sarah's pulse ticked up. Any. Reason why? The waitress shrugged. Said it was about a robbery last week. But my guess? He's working for someone who ain't the county. Sarah left a generous tip and stepped outside. Jake saw her face and didn't need to ask. Let's go, she said. They pushed hard through the night, trading shifts behind the wheel, the hum of the tires on the road a constant reminder of the miles slipping away. By the time they reached the Mississippi River, the SUV felt like its own little world. Weapons, maps, the evidence locked in a hard case between them. They stopped on the east bank just long enough to stretch. The water rolled dark and slow. Under the bridge lights, Jake leaned against the hood, eyes scanning the river. You know Morrison's going to try to cut us off before D.C. Sarah nodded. She have people watching the major routes, which means we stop being predictable. They rerouted south, taking smaller highways and county roads. Sometimes doubling back just to muddy their trail. It cost them hours, but it was worth it to keep anyone from getting a clear line on them. It was just after midnight when Martinez called. You've got a problem, she said without preamble. Morrison's using her Pentagon access to push a watch bulletin. She's framing you two for the murder of a military attach in San Diego. Sarah exchanged a look with Jake. She's building the justification. Exactly, Martinez said. If she can paint you as rogue operatives before tomorrow night, anyone you try to approach in D.C. will treat you like hostile actors. She's already got the FBI and DHS on alert. Jake's jaw tightened. Then we get to someone she doesn't control fast. I might have a lead, Martinez said. Retired brigadier general, lived through 3 administrations without selling out, name's Harlan Beckett. He's got influence in the defense oversight committees. If you can get him the evidence in person, he can go public before Morrison moves. Where is he? Sarah asked. Alexandria, Virginia. But you'll have to get through at least one checkpoint to reach him. Sarah glanced at the clock on the dash. We've got 9 hours. By the time they hit the outskirts of Virginia, dawn was turning. The sky a dull steel gray. Traffic thickened. And with it came the risk of being boxed in. Jake took side streets, avoiding the main arteries. Sarah's eyes swept over every parked car, every pedestrian who lingered too long. They were 3 blocks from Beckett's address when a black SUV pulled out from a side street and fell in behind them. Sarah didn't even need to check the plates. They found us. Jake's voice was calm. Then we finished this run the same way we've done everything else. Fast and ugly. He made a hard right, cutting through a narrow alley barely. Wider than the SUV, the black vehicle followed, tires skidding on wet pavement. Sarah's cig was in her hand before they cleared the next turn. Last stretch, she said. Jake grinned without humor. Let's make it count. The alley spit them out onto a narrow residential street lined with brick townhouses. Dawnlight crept across the slate roofs. Glinting off rainwater pooled in the gutters. Jake took the next corner hard. Tires squealing, the engine growling as he pushed the SUV faster. Behind them, the black vehicle stayed locked on their tail. Matching every move, Sarah was already scanning. Narrow streets meant no room to maneuver, and worse, nowhere to vanish. We can't outrun them here, she said. We hold them long enough to reach Beckett's door. Jake gave a short nod. 2 blocks. They cut through an intersection. Just as a garbage truck lumbered into the cross street, blocking part of the black SUV's line. It gave them seconds, but seconds were enough. Contact left, Sarah said sharply. Jake glanced in time to see a second black vehicle turning in. Ahead of them, box in. Sarah's pulse stayed steady. I'll clear the front. Keep moving. The SUV ahead braked hard, trying to stop them cold. Sarah leaned out her window, bracing against the A-pillar. 2 shots, one into the radiator, the other into the driver's side glass. The vehicle jerked sideways, momentum carrying it into a parked car. Jake threaded through the gap without slowing. Beckett's his next turn. Arlen Beckett's townhouse was a tall, narrow building with a deep blue door and brass numbers polished to a gleam. Jake pulled onto the curb so hard the SUV rocked. Sarah was out before it fully stopped, duffel in hand. Beckett answered on the second knock, barefoot, wearing a T-shirt that said nitrogen monoxide, IDONTMSD above a faded infantry emblem. His eyes were sharp despite the early hour, Martinez called. He said, "Get in." They stepped inside, the smell of coffee and old books wrapping around them. Beckett locked the door, then gestured toward a study crowded with shelves and framed photographs, the kind of room that had heard more secrets than most war rooms. Sarah set the duffel on his desk and unzipped it, pulling out the files and storage drives. "This is everything. Hayes died getting it to us. It's proof Morrison's been running an arms trafficking network, using covert units to eliminate witnesses. She's planning a coup tonight." Beckett's face hardened as he flipped through the files. "I knew she was ambitious. I didn't know she was a traitor. You've got the connections to get this in front of the right people," Jake said. "People she doesn't own?" "I do," Beckett said slowly. "But you've got a bigger problem. She's got people watching me. If she sees you here, you won't make it to noon." As if on cue, Sarah's instincts pricked. Footsteps on the wet pavement outside. Too fast for a morning jogger. Too light for boots. Too many for pedestrians. She was at the window before she thought about it. Fingers brushing the curtain just enough to see. Two men in dark clothing moved up the street from opposite ends, rifles slung low. "Jake," she said. He was already moving, checking sight lines, assessing cover. "They're here," Beckett stood. "Basement. There's a service door to the alley. I'll hold them here long enough for you to get clear." Sarah shook her head. "If you go down now, there's no one to deliver the evidence. We hold them just long enough for you to get a secure uplink out." The first shot came through the front window, spraying glass across the study. Sarah hit the floor, sliding behind a heavy oak bookshelf. Jake returned fire from the side hallway. Short, controlled bursts that drove the shooters back to cover. Beckett ducked into an adjacent room, reappearing with an old, well-maintained M1 carbine. "Never thought I'd need this again." Sarah risked a glance out the shattered window. More movement. Another two operators crossing from behind a parked van. "They're flanking." Jake tossed her a fresh mag. "We hold them for 5 minutes. That's all Beckett needs." The fight was close and sharp. The townhouse walls shook with each suppressed burst. Wood splintered. A picture frame fell, glass shattering against the floor. Sarah moved between windows, forcing their attackers to guess her position. Jake held the hallway, pinning the flanking team every time they tried to advance. In the study, Beckett worked with calm precision, slotting a drive into a secure laptop, fingers moving fast over the keys. "1 minute," he called. A grenade clinked onto the hardwood. Sarah didn't think. She grabbed it, heaved it back through the window. It went off mid-air, the blast slamming into the facade, peppering the street with debris. 30 seconds. Beckett shouted. When the transfer finished, Beckett yanked the drive free, shoved it into a small fireproof case, and strapped it to his chest. "It's going public. Now you get out of here." Sarah shook her head. "We're not leaving you with them." "You're not staying either," Beckett said. "If Morrison's people catch you here, she spins it as you trying to assassinate me. This way, I can confirm the story, and you live long enough to make sure the press gets the rest." Jake met Sarah's eyes. No words, but the meaning was clear. They couldn't win this fight. Not here, not now. They exited through the basement service door into the alley. Rain slick on the cracked pavement. The city felt tight around them. Every window a possible muzzle flash. Every corner a possible trap. Jake led them south toward the river, keeping to side streets and narrow cut-throughs. Twice they heard footsteps behind them. But when they doubled back to check, the alleys were empty. By the time they reached the riverfront, the air was thick with the smell of wet stone and diesel from passing boats. Sarah stopped in the shadow of a warehouse awning. Beckett won't have long before Morrison figures out he's got the files. Then we make sure she's too busy to move on him, Jake said. Martinez's voice came over the secure phone, tense but steady. The files are out. Beckett's already pushed them to 2 oversight members and an independent journalist. But Morrison's moving fast. She's calling the leak forged disinformation and rallying her people. Sarah could almost hear the clock ticking. How much time? Less than 8 hours before the meeting. And she's still in position to move if she thinks she can control the fallout. Jake's voice was grim. Then we take her ability to move. Martinez hesitated. You're talking about hitting her directly. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Jake said. Sarah met his gaze. We finish this before she gets to the Pentagon. The plan came together fast. Morrison was still operating from a secure residence in Arlington, surrounded by loyal contractors and layered security. She wasn't expecting an assault, not from 2 people she thought were on the run. Sarah sketched the approach on the back of a damp receipt. Service alley behind the residence connects to an underground garage. Contractors rotate every 4 hours. If we hit during the shift change, we can get inside before the outer perimeter reacts. Jake pointed to the diagram. Once inside, we force her into a comms blackout. No calls, no orders. We don't have to kill her. We just have to keep her from giving the green light. Martinez's voice was flat. That's a lot of risk for a maybe. Sarah's answer was quiet, but firm. It's the only shot we've got. By the time the light began to fade, Sarah and Jake were in position, crouched in the shadows of the service alley. The hum of distant traffic overhead. Sarah checked her weapon. Every motion smooth and silent. The air smelled of rain and hot asphalt. Jake's voice was low. Shift change in 2 minutes. Sarah nodded once. The sound of boots on wet pavement reached them. 2 contractors leaving. Another pair approaching from the far end. They moved. In less than 10 seconds, they were through the garage entrance, past the first checkpoint, and into the belly of Morrison's stronghold. The final move was beginning. The hum of fluorescent lights greeted them inside the underground garage. The space was cold, smelling faintly of oil and concrete dust. Sarah's boots made no sound as she crossed the painted lines. Her sig held low but ready. Jake moved in sync, scanning each parked vehicle, each shadowed corner. 2 contractors stood by a black SUV near the far wall, mid-conversation. The shift change exactly as Sarah had timed it. Jake's hand brushed her arm once. Now, they moved together. A silent approach. Then 2 swift, precise strikes. One contractor went down with a chokehold. The other crumpled from the butt of Sarah's pistol to the jaw. Both unconscious before they could draw breath to shout. Jake dragged them behind the SUV, securing their hands with flex cuffs. 5 minutes before someone notices, he murmured. Sarah nodded, scanning for the service door. There. The service door opened into a stark corridor. The kind designed for utility, not comfort. White cinder block walls. Gray industrial carpet. The hum of an vacuum fit system overhead. They followed the hallway until it split. Sarah took point, her memory tracing the layout from the stolen blueprints Martinez had given them. Stairs to the main level, left, security office to the right. Security first, Jake said. If we leave the cameras running, we're done before we start. The office was small but bristling with tech. Wall-to-wall monitors showing feeds from every corner of the property. A single guard sat at the console, sipping coffee, eyes half-lidded from the monotony. Sarah's pistol tapped his temple. Before he realized he wasn't alone, quiet, she said, hands where I can see them. Jake moved to the desk, pulling the guard's sidearm and locking it in a filing cabinet. Cut the feeds to the garage and the north wing. The guard hesitated, eyes darting toward the silent alarm button under the desk. Jake's voice hardened. "Don't." The man swallowed, then did as told. Several monitors went dark. Sarah zip-tied him to the chair, then took a quick mental snapshot of the remaining active feeds. She's in the north wing, second floor, 2 guards outside her office. Jake's jaw tightened. "Then we go now." The stairs creaked faintly under their weight. On the main level, the air changed, warmer, scented faintly with expensive cologne and the wax of polished wood floors. This was Morrison's domain. Not the sterile lower levels. They kept to the edges of the hallways, pausing at each corner to listen. Voices drifted from a room ahead. Low, measured, military. Sarah signaled Jake to stop. 2 guards, just like the feed had shown, standing on either side of a closed double door. Rifles slung but hands loose and ready. Sarah and Jake split without a word, each taking a flank on her count. They struck. Jake's elbow slammed into one guard's sternum, dropping him before his rifle cleared the sling. Sarah's knee took the other in the gut, then a sharp twist to the neck sent him to the floor. They eased the bodies aside, careful not to let weapons clatter. Jake looked at her once. "Ready?" Sarah exhaled. "Always." They pushed through the doors into Morrison's office. The room was a study in power. Deep mahogany desk, floor-to-ceiling windows showing the Arlington skyline, the faint gleam of military commendations on the walls, and behind the desk, General Patricia Morrison. Her hair was perfectly arranged, her uniform immaculate, her eyes sharp and calculating, locked on Sarah the moment they entered. "Well," Morrison said, voice smooth, "the ghosts return." Jake's pistol was steady. "End this now, Morrison. Call off your people." Morrison smiled faintly, leaning back in her chair. "You have no idea how small you are in this game." Sarah stepped forward, her own weapon trained center mass. "We have everything, Morrison, the files, the transfers, your orders, Beckett's. Already made sure the first wave is in the hands of oversight." Morrison's eyes flickered. Just once, before she recovered. "Oversight will believe what I tell them. You think they'll take the word of 2 fugitives? Murder suspects? No, they'll take my word. And by the time your little evidence is discredited, tonight will be history." "You're planning to kill the other Joint Chiefs," Sarah said. Morrison didn't deny it. "They're obstacles. And in 12 hours, they'll be gone. And this country will have a leader willing to do what's necessary to keep it alive." Jake's voice was ice. "By selling it to the highest bidder?" Morrison's smile thinned. "By making sure the people with real power use it effectively. You've both seen the incompetence, the waste. This is the only way to fix it." Sarah took another step forward. "No, this is the way you burn it. Down." The air between them tightened, the kind of silence that comes before either a shot or a surrender. Then Morrison's hand drifted toward the edge of the desk. "Don't," Sarah warned. Morrison's fingers stilled, her eyes locked. On Sarah's, voice lowering to a razor's edge. "Do you think you can kill me before my people storm this room?" Sarah didn't answer with words. She placed a small black device on the desk, a compact signal jammer. Its red light pulsed to life. "Your people won't hear the order," Sarah said. "Not from you, not from anyone." For the first time, Morrison's mask cracked. Jake kept his weapon up. "It's over." But Sarah knew better. With people like Morrison, it was never over. The door behind them crashed open. 2 more contractors surged in, rifles up. Jake dropped the first with a double tap. Sarah pivoted, firing once, sending the second stumbling back into the hallway. Morrison lunged sideways, hand diving into a desk drawer. Sarah's boot slammed the drawer shut, hard enough to pinch skin. Morrison hissed, jerking her hand back. "Sit," Sarah ordered. For a heartbeat, Morrison hesitated, then sat, the calculation in her eyes shifting. "You think you can hold me here until midnight?" she asked, No, Sarah said, voice quiet but uncheckable. Just long enough for the truth to bury you. They secured Morrison to her own desk chair with a length of paracord from Jake's pack, her wrists bound tight against the armrests. Sarah positioned the jammer so it covered the entire office. Through the window, the sky over Arlington was sliding toward evening. Every minute they held here was a minute closer to the meeting. Morrison would never attend. Jake stood at the window, scanning for movement. We can't stay much longer. Once they figure out she's off comms, they'll breach from every side. Then we make sure they hear something first. Sarah said. From her pocket, she pulled a compact transmitter, one of Martinez's gifts. She'd kept it as insurance. With a quick flick, she activated the live audio feed. Morrison's voice, every damning word she'd spoken, was already streaming to Martinez and Beckett. You're on record, General, Sarah said. Morrison's gaze sharpened. You won't make it out alive, Sarah's reply was almost a whisper. Maybe not, but you won't walk into that meeting either. The first thud came from the hallway, the battering of a breached team on the double doors. Jake chambered a fresh round. Time to go. Sarah stepped close to Morrison, their eyes level. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, she said. Quietly, it simply acts. Then she turned, and she and Jake slipped through the side door just as the main one blew inward. The office filling with armed men who would find their general alive, but bound, silenced, and exposed. They moved fast down the service stairs, boots hammering metal. The echo of shouts above chasing them out into the night, toward whatever came next. The night air hit them like a cold slap. Sarah and Jake cleared the side alley behind Morrison's residence, their breath steaming in the damp chill. Sirens wailed in the distance, but here, the street was momentarily empty, a rare pocket of stillness before the city erupted. They didn't stop moving. Jake led them toward a narrow service lane where Martinez had staged a secondary vehicle, a battered delivery van with no markings. By the time they were inside, the comms crackled. Martinez's voice came through low but urgent. You've done it. We've got Morrison on a live feed admitting everything. Beckett's feeding it to oversight, and it's already hitting secure channels outside her network. Sarah leaned back against the metal wall of the van, her pulse finally easing. What's the reaction? Panic, Martinez said. She's screaming orders, but her own people are hesitating. Nobody wants to go down for her now that it's out. Half the coup team's already pulling back. The rest are trying to figure out which way the wind's blowing. Jake's eyes met Sarah's. She's finished. Sarah wanted to believe that. But she'd been around long enough to know people like Morrison didn't just disappear. The van threaded through Arlington's quiet streets, heading for the safe point Martinez had arranged. Inside, the mood was a strange mix of relief and unease. The hardest part was over, but the truth was, they were still fugitives. Martinez broke the silence. You two need to disappear for a while, even with this evidence. Morrison's loyalists will be looking for payback. You're not cleared, and you won't be for months, maybe years. Sarah gave a short laugh without humor. Story of my life. Beckett's putting you in contact with someone who runs secure exfil routes. Martinez continued. New IDs, clean records, deep cover. You can walk away from this. Jake glanced at Sarah. You going to? She didn't answer right away. Outside the window, the Capitol's glow hung low on the horizon, the symbol of everything they'd just fought to protect, and everything that had almost been lost. I'd see the morning first, she said. They reached the safe point just after midnight, a warehouse near the rail lines, its windows blacked out, a single light burning above the door. Inside, Beckett was waiting, coffee in hand, the fireproof case on the table beside him. He looked tired but resolute. It's done, he said. Oversight's moving in. They've frozen Morrison's accounts, secured the bases she had under contractor control. The Joint Chiefs are alive because of you. Sarah stepped forward. And the rest of our unit? Beckett's jaw tightened. Their names are going to be cleared. Officially, you're still ghosts. But history will know what they did. What you both did. Jake reached for the coffee Beckett offered. She's still out there, though. Under guard, Beckett said. Her own security detail handed her over when the evidence hit the wires. She faced charges for treason, whether the court-martial sticks. He let the thought hang. Sarah knew what he meant. Power didn't just evaporate. It leaked, pooling in corners, waiting for a way back. They stayed in the warehouse until dawn, listening as the city above shifted under the weight of the news. It came in waves. A breaking story on foreign arms deals, leaked mission files, anonymous sources inside the Pentagon confirming an internal power grab. By morning, Morrison's name was everywhere. Martinez closed her phone after the 10th call. In an hour, she's done. Whatever deal her lawyers try to cut, she's never wearing a uniform again. Jake leaned against the wall. Arms crossed. That's good enough for me. Sarah didn't move from the table. Her eyes were on the case. It's not good enough for me. They both looked at her. She doesn't just vanish into a cell. She built this. She killed our people. She turned everything we fought for into a market. If she's breathing, she's still dangerous. Martinez shook her head. You go after her now. You undo everything we've done. She's beaten. Take the win. Sarah's voice was low but sharp. I've buried too many people who thought someone was beaten. Jake didn't speak, but the look in his eyes said he understood. They left the warehouse in silence, each of them carrying their own version of what came next. By noon, they were on a back road outside the city. The delivery van replaced with a pair of used sedans, each registered to a ghost identity. Martinez had made the introductions to Beckett's roots, people who could make them vanish. If they wanted to, at the crossroads, they stopped. Jake leaned against his car. We don't have to go the same way. Sarah closed her door but didn't step away. Where will you go? Somewhere quiet, somewhere nobody knows my name. Might even try fishing again. She smiled faintly. You'd last a week. He grinned. Maybe two. The smile faded, replaced by something heavier. If you ever need backup. She finished for him. I'll know where to find you. They didn't shake hands. They didn't hug. They just stood there for a moment. Two soldiers with too much behind them and too little ahead. And then Jake got in his car and drove west. Sarah watched until the dust swallowed him, then turned east. She didn't head for a safe house. She headed for the detention facility where they were holding Morrison. She walked in under a borrowed ID and a cover story about reviewing her security protocols. The guard at the door didn't look twice. Morrison was in a small interview room, hands cuffed to the table. She looked older than she had in her office. The sharpness still there, but dulled around the edges. Cross, she said, like she was greeting an old colleague. Come to gloat? Sarah sat across from her, leaning forward until their eyes locked. No, just to see the face of the woman who killed my family. Morrison's mouth curved in a thin smile. Families die every day in our line of work. Don't pretend yours was special. Sarah let the silence stretch until even Morrison's eyes flickered. Then she stood. You're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell, Sarah said, and every day you're in there, you'll know the people you tried to own are free because you lost. She left without looking back. That night, Sarah crossed the Potomac on foot, the city lights reflecting off the black water. The coup had been stopped. The files were in the right hands, but there was no celebration in her. This was the kind of victory that came without joy, the kind where the cost never stopped counting. Somewhere out there, Jake was on his road, chasing whatever quiet he could find. Beckett would keep the truth alive in the right rooms. Martinez would clean up the mess in the shadows. And Sarah Nightingale Cross would keep moving, because standing still had never been an option. Voiceover style ending. Sometimes the mission doesn't end when the shooting stops. Sometimes it follows you, in the faces of the ones you lost. In the moments you replay at 3 a.m., in the quiet you can't quite trust, we stopped one war before it started. But there's always another waiting, and sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.